There are more than 1,000 public school campuses across Kentucky, and there was a state law several years ago requiring a school resource officer in place on each of these campuses. There's been a lot of work done to make sure that is reality, but more work is needing to be done.
We've got to continue to keep our mandates. We can't slack at all with that. And that's, I think, one of the important things about our office going in and checking and working with schools every year is that reminder is always there.
The mandates were put in place after the 2018 shooting at Marshall County High School. The law requires each school campus to have a school resource officer. Districts are still working to comply with that, and 758 schools are covered. Wilcox told lawmakers on a campus security task force that schools are keeping their exterior doors closed and interior classroom doors locked during instructional time.
You know, not shutting your door during instructional time can be dangerous, but it's one of those things that we always have to remind ourselves to do. And so that's what I see that we need to continue to do, and we need to come up with new ideas.
And Wilcox told lawmakers that the two things hurting the progress are funding and personnel. In Frankfort, Phil Pendleton, WKYT.
Wilcox says in traveling the nation, he is surprised to see the number of states that do not have their own centers for school safety and other measures that Kentucky has put in place since the Marshall County school shooting.